Hey everyone, it's TJ. Thanks for checking out my channel and checking out this video. This video I want to talk a little bit about PTSD and some of the mental illnesses that they can lead to. A lot of people confuse PTSD as a mental illness itself, and the disorder um, does cause the development of mental illnesses, things like anxiety, depression, bipolarism, sleep disorders, various different degrees of all of those, and other mood disorders and things. But PTSD itself is based on the traumatic event that you could have went through, and anyone can go through it. I battled PTSD for 15 years as a result. I'm a disabled vet, and veterans get a lot of attention. I've brought a lot of attention to even the term. A lot of people I talk to now have at least heard of it, even though they're not fully don't fully understand what it is. And the first thing I like to tell people is, first of all, PTSD, we all have PTSD to some degree. To some degree, like, because all that simply is just a trauma, an unexpected trauma, a single event, a single life-changing, altering event. And we all have those. I mean, just because life-altering doesn't necessarily mean in a just a negative way or a really bad negative way. I mean, a life altering can be, you know, I mean, you could have turned left instead of right and not met the wife or husband that you're sitting next to now. Like, so it doesn't have to be major, but I firmly believe that we all suffer from PTSD to some extent, and it's why you see um, you see a lot of people that are being treated for all kinds of mental illness. You hear a lot about it and stuff. And um, one of the things that's confusing about that is um, you never hear, you know, you never hear of treating the cause, just the result. Depression, anxiety, all those things are a result, and you treat these things, or when you're in treatment for these things, you're not there. You're not learning to heal. You're just being given tools to cope. And there's a big difference. So part of PTSD is truly understanding it and what led to. I thought when I first initially started therapy, and I did a little over a year of intensive therapy. Like, I retired from work, um, everything. That was all I did, day in, day out, was deal with it. And when I first started, I thought that I was going to have to deal with the trauma that kind of broke me. I thought that was going to be what I was facing, which is bad enough, and it is, or bad enough, as bad as they come. And I thought that was going to be my starting point. But the first thing I learned was what PTSD is, and how it progresses, and what it develops into, and to heal it, to start the process of healing it, you have to first understand how it even came together, if that makes sense. Like, I had to understand what PTSD was, and how it led to just where I was at, you know, and because when you experience most people are not broken by their first traumatic event in life. Most. It has to be a pretty, and even the worst traumatic events or whatever, the majority of people get over, and move on. It's rarely, even though it's big. And that's because what happens is when you have your first trauma in life, no matter when that comes, and the earlier the more harmful it can be, because your mind is so underdeveloped. Because the problem is, when you go through an event of any kind of tragedy like that, like a major one, every decision you make in life going forward after that is affected. And it can clearly lead to more traumas. Most of the time does. More, and it gets very complex, very fast. And in a matter of years, you can pick up. Now you went from having one traumatic event in your life to now, and you go 3 years and there's been five, but you've added five others on there somehow. and you still keep kind of going through. And that's what happened to me. My first major trauma was as a child, and it led to multiple ones throughout my childhood and in the early adulthood. And then when I had my last major traumatic event, I was still fairly young. I was, mid 20s, 26, 27 years old. And everything, my whole life, or life as I know it, came to an end. And I thought it was all tied to that one single trauma, It took me a while to put together that I was going to have to unravel way before that. I was going to have to understand why that trauma, as bad as it was, broke me as bad as it did, because it in itself, it had all the power to do that for sure, but based on my own kind of makeup and personality and just who I am, it doesn't make sense for me that I couldn't pick myself up from one traumatic, from one event eventually. But I couldn't for 15 years. I just couldn't. I, I, I did everything that you're told to do to cope with it. I went to the doctor. I went on medications. I went to therapy. And 90% of the time, I was able to stay within the lanes because that's what coping is. You're numb. You don't feel anything, and you spend all your time thinking about two things: who you think you used to be in the life you used to have, and the pain, regret, and guilt you have of all the traumas and poor decisions you made as a result of them. That's all you think about. You spend no time thinking about the present life you're in, the one you hope to live one day. It's just not even, it doesn't even occur to you. Like you're just consumed with that pain and anger. And this comes out in all kinds of ways. Depression and anxiety and anger issues and mood disorders and sleep disorders and the more complex your situation is and the more prone you are to it individually, then those can become very, very extreme and lead to just years and years. And I know in my case, like I didn't believe for a second there was just anything I could do to heal it. It was too complex. It went back too far, too deep. What I didn't realize though at the time was that's not how I would look at it. Once I actually made the first step and made one step forward. What I didn't realize is that making that one little step forward would give me all the confidence in the world to make the next step. I didn't think it was going to be that way at all. In my mind, it seemed so overwhelming and so crazy and complex that there was just no way. The idea is like I don't have enough time, because it felt like I was going to have to fix it all in at one moment, and I was not going to feel any progress or happiness until I fixed it all, and that was going to take a lifetime in itself. That's not what happened at all. Once I fully understood what I was dealing with, once I fully understood the difference between thinking about my trauma and facing it, feeling it, and how good that feels afterwards once you truly do that, and knowing that every other trauma that I'm willing to put in my time, effort, and energy to face, I'm going to come out of eventually feeling just as relieved and good about, So I feel like I have all the time in the world because I know that I'll get to what I need to work on, and I won't be there to just tinker with it this time. I'll be there to fix it and move on, And once you put enough of those together, it's no longer just a possibility. It's just what's going to happen, That's the difference in feeling your pain and thinking about it. Because when you truly feel it, you get to release it. And when you can release it, you're free. You get your life back, And for me, I had to unravel that initial trauma. See, I thought I was going to start with the last one, and work my way back. And no, not at all. Because that's not how it built my life, That's not how it played out. So I had to go back and get in touch with that original one. And for me, it was in childhood. And then uh, once I was able to reconnect to that pain and put those connections back together, it was very, very easy for me going forward and connecting what led me to my other traumas. You know, see, most people, when you're deeply depressed, you present yourself as a victim all the time because that's what you feel like. You feel like a victim. Now you go overboard and you become consumed with it, and you consume the people around with you, and you start to look at yourself as a victim in everything. When the truth is, you are a victim, and you're desperately wanting people to recognize that. But you're a victim of one major thing initially. You're not a victim of all these other things that are now, you know, now you have depression because of this, and this was done to you, and that was done to you, and this was done to you, and that's because you spent so much time thinking about all the things that was done to you and how you were wronged, and why that led to pain, and so on and so on and so forth. You know, no, that is you've got to come to terms with what you're really a victim over. You know, and the biggest part of that is PTSD. If you went through a traumatic event, chances are, if you have PTSD from it, the reason you do is because of guilt. See, people don't understand that. It's guilt. It's guilt. It's guilt of what they did in that traumatic situation. So that's what causes PTSD. You know, for a veteran, it could be something like you spend all this time training and building yourself up to go to war, and then you go to war. You know, and you go and you don't perform the way you think you should or should have or plan to, or maybe you freeze, you know, or maybe you break the rules of engagement a little bit but out of fear. You know, you, instead of relying on your training, you got caught up in your emotions and you made a bad call and you covered it up because you knew it wasn't intentional or on purpose, you know. So you have guilt. Maybe you didn't cover your a buddy as quickly as you should have because you were slow because of fear. So now you have guilt over that. You know, and these are not the things that you come out and openly talk about when you come home. You know, no one asks you like, hey, okay, so did you do anything wrong? You can't even bring yourself to even, you know. So, and it's that guilt. It's the same thing that happens. I talked to someone that had PTSD from a car accident, a major car accident. They caused a fatality. They hit somebody and caused a fatality. They didn't get charged for it, nothing like that. It's a complete accident. It was a rainy day. The road was wet. Now, here's what caused the PTSD though. The person had dropped their cell phone. They wasn't on it, but they dropped it, fell out of the seat, fell down the floorboard. They reached down to grab it. When they did, they overcorrected a little bit, and because the road was wet, went off the road, bam, hit somebody, killed them. Now, in the police reports and all that, it never said nothing about reaching down with no phone. It just said road was wet, stuff like that, you know. And if that person would have stepped up that day and said, "Look, I know the roads are wet, but it was actually I took my hands off the road or took my eyes off the road, only held on with one hand, and I reached down to grab my cell phone," of course they would have been charged or could have been, you know. You understand? And plus, and the guilt comes from you choose to believe what you can wrap your head around. As soon as they told them, well, okay, yeah, we looked at it, and it was the wet road that caused it. The person goes, okay, wasn't my fault then, but they still have that feeling, right? It's inside of them. Like I know that they say it's not my fault. I know the road was wet. I know I wasn't intentionally trying to hurt somebody. I know I only looked off the road for a split second, but it's still there. It's still there. You still don't know if that accident would have happened if you hadn't reached down to grab your phone. And you have to carry that guilt forever. Forever. you know, and it's guilt over those situations that causes PTSD. And it's you have to get in touch with that to figure out what caused it. See, most people think what caused the PTSD is the maybe if they were assaulted, it was the person on the other end. And, and they want to tell you all about it. I don't know why they did what they did. I don't know why this person would have hurt me. I don't know why he was, or this guy was an animal. He was this. He was that. It's all about that person. You see what I'm saying? You know. But as traumatic as that was, and as difficult as that was, and it caused its own set of problems, I'm sure. That's not the PTSD that you got to get in touch with. That's not the pain you got to get in touch with. You know, like you hear a lot about it. A lot of times in sexual assault cases, women get PTSD a lot, and like I really related uh, to women in my. I've always related more to women than men, but in my group, I didn't get PTSD from combat, so I didn't really relate. I related to the being a veteran, and like I did my thing. I just didn't get hurt, in combat. So I don't relate to freezing up in war and things like that. Like I can understand it how that would come, but I didn't really. It didn't connect with me though, even though I was a veteran myself. What connected with me was a sexual assault victim, a woman who had dealt minorly with anxiety for probably 20 years. I mean, severe anxiety. And she was a sexual assault survivor. And she, I mean, she is doing really well now and everything. And I've been able to talk to her about things in detail. But it was her that helped me connect, though, the power of guilt and PTSD and what it can cause, because I fully understood the pain in her when she was describing it to me. And she told me her PTSD came from when she was assaulted. She did nothing to fight back. She just went with it. Partly out of fear, partly out of just wanting to get it over as quick as possible, partly out of just froze, didn't know what to do, man. But she didn't fight back. She also probably shouldn't have been with the person that she was with. She had been warned or whatever that this wasn't a good guy. Not that he would assault her by any means, but that he just wasn't necessarily a good guy. A lot of her friends and family didn't want her having anything to do with it. Two, she was at a place that she probably shouldn't have been. Later, at a time that she probably shouldn't have been. This is just all the things that this is how she felt. She didn't feel she should have been with the guy where she was at, doing what she was doing, wearing what she was wearing. She didn't believe she fought back enough, or at all. She chose to just, but like I said, guys train for a year to go to war, get there and preach. They're like, you don't know how you're going to react to trauma, man, until you've really been through it, you know? And then it depends on what kind of trauma it is, how vulnerable it makes you, and what could be more vulnerable than being a woman and being sexually assaulted. What could be more vulnerable? That's what I connect to. Like, what could there other than a child? So she was like, how could I come up the next day and go around and report all these things, without people saying, well, that's what you get, or what did you expect, or why were you even there, or how come you don't have scratches all over you, or he doesn't have scratches on him, how come, you know what I'm saying? Like, they just completely start tearing it down and basically make it feel like every bit of it was her fault. Even though she has the right to go anywhere she wants, wear whatever she wants, talk to whatever she wants. That doesn't give nobody the right to, like, you know, abuse her. And I connected with that deeply because she carried the guilt of all of that around. The guilt of what she did or didn't do. And it impacted her life in every way, shape, and form going forward. From relationships to jobs to trust to family to just everything. And it was all simply because of the guilt. And she told me that when she would talk about the event for so long, she talked about just all the pain of it, and she couldn't understand him. She wanted to talk to him. She wanted to ask him why, and she wanted that, not understanding none of that was going to do anything for her. None of it, because it wasn't about him. That dude was a predator. Preyed on a child basically, and there's no relief of anything going to come out of that unless it's you just got some stuff on your mind you want to yell out, and those are the ears that needs to hear it. But that's all you're going to do. You're not going to release any pain. You're not going to get over any of your trauma from it. You're just going to feel like you got some words off your chest. You at least got to tell him how much of an asshole you are, and that'll make you feel good for a brief moment, maybe. Most of the time you realize that, well, that wasn't as, I didn't get out of that what I hoped. You ever thought or seen like those interviews where people that go watch someone get put to death because they murdered their friend or this or that, and it's 30 years after the fact, and they talk about that they dreamed of that day, the revenge and the hope, and they couldn't wait, and then they get there and it happens, and it wasn't that at all. They were still there to watch another human being die, and it wasn't relieving at all to them. All it did was just bring back all the pain of their original loss, because they hadn't dealt with it. They thought by the day, when the day came, that the person that harmed them was going to be brought to justice. That was going to release the pain, and it did nothing for them. It did nothing but then make them ask, well, why didn't that work? I thought that was going to work. That was supposed to work. I've been waiting on that forever to work. It didn't work. Because it's not about the other person when you deal with trauma. So you get over the physical and all that stuff almost immediately, or within a quick period of time, and you've got to know, you've got to get in touch with your own trauma to do that. I'm trying to make sense of it. I just want people to understand, I guess, more than anything, that there's a root out there that's your key. It's your key. And if you can feel that and come to terms with it, it'll show you the way of how to unravel all the rest of it. And you'll be amazed at the difference it'll make. And the fact that you'll feel like you're healing, not coping, for the first time in a very, very long time. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Rambled on there a little bit, but I guess I just wanted to get the point across. Anyone out there that's dealing with stuff and is looking for answers, you're doing the first thing, and that's searching. Don't stop searching. Don't stop. That's the one thing I did tell myself throughout my 15 years, and that was, or my whole life, going from my very first trauma, is don't stop searching for a way to either remove it from your mind completely or deal with it. Thanks, guys. Good night.